They told me I wasn't beautiful enough to marry their son. That was the exact sentence. No sugarcoating, no careful phrasing, just a flat, cutting statement that hung in the air like a slap across my face. I remember the way the words stung, not just in that moment, but how they echoed for days, weeks, years afterward. Even now, at 30 years old, I can close my eyes and see the room, hear the tremor in my own breath, feel the cold pit in my stomach. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I was 26, engaged to Daniel Whitmore, the man I thought I would spend forever with. I thought I was stepping into a new life, a new family, a new beginning. But instead, I was being stripped of my dignity in front of people who saw me as nothing more than a disappointment, a blemish on their carefully constructed image of perfection. My name is Clara Bennett. I grew up in a middle-class home in Ohio, nothing glamorous, nothing extravagant, but filled with the kind of grit that teaches you how to work hard for every little thing. My parents weren't wealthy, but they taught me honesty, compassion, and the importance of standing on my own 2 feet. I was never the kind of woman who turned heads when she walked into a room. I knew that. I wasn't the tallest or the most glamorous. My hair was chestnut brown, always tied back in a practical ponytail during my long hours at work. My clothes were simple, functional. I was the type who carried snacks in her purse and wore shoes she could actually walk in. Some people might call that plain. I called it real. But what I lacked in outward flash, I carried in determination. I had dreams of building a career, of carving out a place for myself where my voice mattered. I was ambitious, maybe quietly so, but it was there, humming inside me, even if I didn't yet know where it would take me. At 26, I thought my life was finally falling into place. I had a good job at a small marketing firm, I had a loving fiancé, and I believed I had found a family who would welcome me in. I thought I was enough. Daniel was everything I thought I wanted. Tall, polished, confident in that easy way people born into wealth often are. He came from money, old money, the kind that stretches back through generations, with country clubs and legacy memberships. He was charming, attentive, and in the early days, he made me feel like I was the most important person in the room. When he proposed, I truly believed he loved me. He got down on one knee in front of the lake where we'd shared our first kiss, and when he slipped that diamond ring on my finger, I thought I'd won the lottery of life. Not the money, the idea of finally being chosen, wanted, cherished. But there's something I didn't see then. Daniel loved me only when it was convenient, only when it didn't cost him anything. He never stood up to his family. He never risked their disapproval. Looking back, that should have been my warning sign. But love blinds you, doesn't it? It makes excuses for people. Meeting his parents was always intimidating. The Whitmores lived in a sprawling estate just outside Boston, a mansion with manicured lawns, crystal chandeliers, and an unspoken set of rules that made me feel like an intruder every time I crossed their threshold. His mother, Evelyn, was the kind of woman who looked like she'd been carved from ice. Her hair was always perfect, her pearls always gleaming, her voice smooth but sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. His father, Charles, had the quiet authority of a man who'd never been told no. Together, they embodied that untouchable, upper-class confidence that made people like me feel small. They were polite to me in the beginning, but it was a politeness that carried a chill. Compliments that weren't really compliments, questions that felt more like evaluations. I always sensed they were measuring me, comparing me to some invisible standard I could never reach. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself Daniel loved me, and that would be enough. The night it all came crashing down, I was sitting in their living room, a place that never felt like home, with its stiff antique chairs and family portraits staring down at me from gilded frames. I had gone over for what I thought was a simple family dinner. Daniel sat beside me, his hand resting lightly on my knee, though now I realize it was more for his comfort than mine. Then Evelyn cleared her throat. Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "Clara," she said, We've given this a lot of thought, and as much as we admire your sincerity, we don't believe you are the right match for Daniel. I blinked, confused. I'm sorry, what? Her eyes met mine, unflinching. You're not beautiful enough to marry our son. The words hit me like a punch. I felt every molecule in my body freeze. I wanted to laugh, to scream, to cry, but instead I just sat there, stunned. Daniel didn't say a word. He didn't defend me. He didn't protest. He stared at the floor like a guilty child, his silence louder than any insult. I turned to him, searching his face. Daniel? But he wouldn't look at me. His father finally spoke. It's not just about beauty, Clara. It's about appearances. Our family is in the public eye. We can't risk a union that doesn't reflect our standards. I remember staring at them, at their perfectly polished faces, at the cold certainty in their tone. I felt stripped bare, as if every insecurity I had ever carried was being paraded in front of me. Then came the final blow. Evelyn held out her hand. The ring, please. I looked down at the diamond on my finger, the symbol of promises, of love, of a future. My hand trembled as I slid it off, the metal suddenly heavy, suffocating. I placed it in her palm, and in that moment, it felt like I was giving away not just the ring, but a piece of myself. I don't remember leaving the house. I don't remember how I got back to my apartment. All I remember is sitting on my bathroom floor that night, knees pulled to my chest, staring at my reflection in the mirror and wondering if they were right. Was I really not beautiful enough? Was I really so lacking that the man who claimed to love me couldn't even open his mouth to defend me? The days that followed were a blur of whispers and pitying glances. Words spread quickly. People in my circle whispered, "Did you hear? Daniel Whitmore called off the engagement. His family said she wasn't good enough." I stopped answering my phone. I stopped going out. Every corner of the city felt like a trap, a reminder of my shame. My friends tried to console me, but their words only reminded me of the hollow ache inside. At night, I cried until my eyes swelled shut. During the day, I forced myself to work, though even the office felt suffocating. Every time I caught someone's sympathetic glance, I felt myself shrink a little more. One evening, I stood in front of my mirror, staring at the tired woman looking back at me. Her eyes were red, her cheeks pale, her shoulders slumped. She was unrecognizable. And for the first time, I felt anger, not at myself, at them, at the Whitmores, for reducing me to something as shallow as my looks, at Daniel for being too weak to stand up for me. It was a quiet anger, the kind that simmers low but steady. I didn't know what I would do with it yet, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of their rejection. So I packed a bag, I quit my job, I disappeared. I left behind the whispers, the humiliation, the pieces of a life that had crumbled. I didn't know where I was going or what I would become, but I knew this. The Clara who had sat in that room, humiliated and discarded, was gone. They thought they had destroyed me, I whisper now, remembering that night. But the truth is, they had just set me free, even if I didn't know it then. When I left Boston, I didn't even say goodbye. I packed my suitcase, threw what little I had into the back of my car, and drove until the skyline in my rearview mirror was nothing but a memory. I didn't care where I ended up. I just needed distance. Distance from the whispers, from the pitying glances, from the shame of being the girl who wasn't good enough. I landed in Chicago. I didn't know a soul there. That was the point. I wanted to vanish, to start somewhere no one had ever heard of Daniel Whitmore or his perfect poisonous family. The first apartment I found was laughable, a one-bedroom walk-up with peeling paint, a radiator that clanged in the middle of the night, and a single window that looked out onto a brick wall. but it was mine. No judgmental eyes, no cold dining rooms filled with antique furniture and cutting remarks, just four walls, a thin mattress, and silence. For the first few weeks, the silence was unbearable. I cried into my pillow, wondering if I'd made a mistake. I thought about Daniel, his laugh, the way he used to hold my hand, the promises he'd whispered late at night. I hated myself for missing him, but I did. I missed the version of him that I thought was real. But every time I remembered Evelyn Whitmore's voice, "You're not beautiful enough to marry our son," the tears dried, replaced by something else, something harder, something sharper. Finding work wasn't glamorous. I waited tables, I handed out flyers on street corners, I took temp jobs at offices where no one remembered my name after I left. I worked double shifts, came home with aching feet, and sometimes fell asleep still wearing my uniform. Money was tight. Some nights, dinner was a packet of ramen noodles and a cup of instant coffee. My bills piled up on the kitchen counter like silent accusations. More than once, I sat on my floor surrounded by overdue notices, my head in my hands, wondering if I had made a colossal mistake. But giving up wasn't an option. If I quit now, then the Whitmores had won. Then Evelyn had been right about me, and I couldn't let that be the story of my life. The turning point came one night when I was working late at a temp job. It was a marketing office, nothing fancy, but I found myself fascinated by the campaigns pinned up on the walls, the brainstorming sessions scribbled across whiteboards. I stayed after hours, tidying up the office, and caught myself reading through proposals, noticing the flaws, thinking about what I'd do differently. And that's when it hit me. I could do this. I didn't have wealth or beauty by their standards, but I had ideas. I had grit. I understood people, understood how to tell a story that made someone listen. The thought lodged in my brain and wouldn't let go. Why should I keep breaking my back to make money for other people when I could build something of my own? I didn't have a grand plan at first. I just knew I was tired of being defined by others, by what I lacked, by what I wasn't. I wanted to build something that proved who I was. So I started small. I printed cheap business cards that read, "Clara Bennett Consulting, Marketing Solutions for Small Businesses." It was laughably simple, but it was mine. The first year was brutal. No one knew my name. No one trusted me with their money. I knocked on doors, sent emails that went unanswered, pitched to small businesses who politely smiled before showing me out. I remember one night sitting at my wobbly kitchen table, staring at my laptop screen, realizing I had $42 left in my bank account. My rent was overdue. My fridge was nearly empty. I curled up on my couch and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. But the next morning, I got up, wiped my swollen eyes, and went back out. Because I had no choice. Slowly, painfully slowly, I landed my first client, a mom-and-pop bakery that needed help promoting their new location. I poured everything I had into that campaign. I designed flyers, set up their social media, stood on street corners handing out samples with the owners themselves. And when their grand opening drew a line around the block, they hugged me like I'd saved their lives. That hug meant more to me than any diamond ring ever could. I didn't do it alone. There was Martin, an older man who owned a small printing shop. He saw me come in week after week, scraping together enough money to print flyers for my clients. One day, he pulled me aside and said, "You've got fire, kid. Don't waste it." He started giving me discounts, sometimes even slipping me free prints when he thought I wasn't looking. He became my mentor, teaching me the ins and outs of running a business. Then there was Sarah. She was my neighbor in that shabby apartment building, a single mom who worked nights as a nurse. She'd knock on my door at midnight with leftover food from her shift, saying, "You look like you haven't eaten in days." She became my confidant, the person I cried to when things fell apart, and the person who celebrated with me when I landed a new client. And then there were the employees I eventually hired. First just one, then two, then more. Young people who reminded me of myself, hungry for a chance. I promised them I'd never treat them the way the world had treated me, and they gave me everything in return. The years blurred together, endless late nights, failures, tiny victories that built into bigger ones. There were moments I thought I wouldn't make it, but slowly, piece by piece, I built something real. By my third year, I had an office space, small, cramped, but an upgrade from my kitchen table. By the fifth year, I was managing a team. By the seventh, we were competing for contracts with firms I'd once only dreamed about. And somewhere along the way, I changed too. I traded my worn jeans and cardigans for tailored suits. I learned how to walk into a room and command attention. I learned that beauty isn't just about bone structure or dresses that cost thousands of dollars. Beauty is confidence. Beauty is knowing your worth, even when others don't. The woman I saw in the mirror wasn't the same one who had crumpled on the bathroom floor years earlier. She was stronger, sharper, unapologetic. It was nearly a decade after the broken engagement when I first heard the rumors. The Whitmores, once untouchable, were in trouble. Their investments had gone sour. Their company was drowning in debt. The empire that had seemed unshakable was crumbling. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself it wasn't my business anymore. But late at night, lying awake in my high-rise apartment, I found myself wondering. I wondered if Evelyn still carried that same icy confidence. I wondered if Charles still spoke with that quiet authority. I wondered if Daniel ever thought about me, if he ever regretted sitting in silence while his family shredded me apart. And then, one morning, I walked into my office to find a resume on my desk. My assistant had left it for me, part of the pile of applicants for a new position we were hiring. My eyes skimmed the name at the top, Daniel Whitmore. I sat there for a long time, staring at the paper, my heart pounding in my chest. The man who once let me be humiliated, the man who had stood by in silence while his family declared I wasn't beautiful enough to marry, was now asking me for a job? I laughed, a sharp, bitter laugh that startled even me. I thought I had buried the past for good, I whispered to myself. But fate had other plans. I used to tell myself I didn't keep tabs on the Whitmores, that their world was as dead to me as the engagement ring I once returned in silence. But when you've been branded not beautiful enough, when you've been humiliated so deeply it stains your bones, you don't just forget, you bury it, and sometimes the ground shifts and the bones surface again. It started with whispers, a headline on a business journal left open on a cafe table, a conversation overheard at a networking event. The Whitmores are in trouble. At first, I thought it was gossip. After all, their name had been synonymous with wealth, prestige, untouchable power. Evelyn Whitmore wouldn't even lower her voice when she criticized people. She believed her family stood above consequences. But then the rumors grew louder. Investments gone wrong, a lawsuit dragging them under, deals collapsing one after another. Their empire was crumbling. The irony wasn't lost on me. Once, they had looked at me like I was dirt under their shoes. Now, they were the ones drowning. I told myself I didn't care. I even laughed when I saw a headline that read, "Whitmore Holdings faces bankruptcy." But later that night, I sat by my window, staring at the glittering skyline of my city, and I admitted the truth. Part of me did care. Not because I wanted them back in my life, but because the girl I used to be, she would have wanted to know. It happened on an ordinary Monday morning. My assistant, Karen, handed me a stack of resumes for the open position in our strategy department. I flipped through them absent-mindedly until my eyes caught a name I hadn't spoken in nearly a decade, Daniel Whitmore. For a second, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. But no, there it was, typed neatly across the top of a resume, paired with a list of qualifications, past roles, and, I almost laughed, a polite summary of his skills. Daniel, the man who once slid a ring on my finger and promised me forever. The man who sat in silence while his family tore me apart. The man who didn't even fight for me. And now he was asking for a job from me. I should have tossed the resume into the trash. I should have ignored it. But instead, I found myself staring at it, my pulse pounding. Fate. It had a cruel sense of humor. A week later, I walked into the conference room, coffee in hand, prepared to meet the shortlisted candidates. I kept my expression neutral, the way I always did. But the moment I pushed open the glass door and saw him sitting there, my breath caught in my throat. Daniel Whitmore. He was older, of course. The polished glow he once carried was dimmed. His suit was good, but not tailored like before. There were faint lines on his face, and his confidence, the thing that had once drawn me in, was cracked. His eyes lifted, and for a split second, they didn't recognize me. Then realization slammed into him. His jaw dropped, his eyes widened. "Clara?" he breathed. I didn't sit right away. I let him take me in. I let him see me, the woman I had become. My fitted navy suit, my hair pulled back in a sleek bun, my heels clicking against the floor with authority. "Yes, Daniel," I said coolly, sliding into the chair across from him. "It's Clara. And just to be clear, this is my company." The silence that followed was delicious. Daniel tried to recover. He cleared his throat, straightened his shoulders, attempted that old charm I once thought was irresistible, but it wasn't there. His voice wavered. I didn't know. "Clara, I had no idea that I survived," I cut in, my tone sharper than I intended. "That I built something?" His face flushed. He fiddled with the edge of his resume. For once, Daniel Whitmore looked small. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. "You've done well." The words were meant as a compliment, but they landed like an insult, like a pat on the head, like I'd finally risen just enough to be acknowledged. I folded my hands on the table, steadying myself. Inside, my emotions were a storm. Rage, vindication, old love that still ached in quiet corners of me. But on the outside, I was calm, professional. "This is an interview," I said firmly. "If you'd like to continue, answer the question, why do you want to work here?" His Adam's apple bobbed. He hesitated. Then he said, Because I need a chance. Things have been hard. My family." I raised a hand. "Stop. This isn't about your family. It's about you. Why should I trust you?" Our eyes locked and I saw it, the flicker of guilt, the memory of that day. He looked away first. After the meeting, I went back to my office, closed the door, and leaned against it, my chest heaving. I had sat across from him like a stranger, but inside, I was screaming. I remembered Evelyn's voice. "She's not beautiful enough." I remembered Daniel's silence, the way he looked at the floor instead of at me. I remembered the weight of the ring in my palm as I set it on the table and walked away. And now here he was, not above me, not untouchable, asking for my help. I should have felt only triumph, but instead I felt a crack inside me, as though the years had vanished and I was back in that room again, fighting for breath. I didn't intend to see him again, but fate wasn't finished. A few days later, Daniel showed up at the office, not for an interview, but to speak to me. My assistant tried to block him, but I agreed. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity, maybe masochism. He sat across from me in my office, his hands folded tightly. "Clara," he began, "I need you to know, that day when they called off the engagement, don't," my voice was sharp, "don't rewrite history. You were there. You heard what they said." "I wanted to fight for you," he said quickly. "I did, but my family, they what?" I snapped. "Controlled you? Paid your bills? Wiped your nose?" His face twisted, pained. "You don't understand." "No, Daniel, I understand perfectly. You chose them. You chose their money, their approval, their shallow standards, over me." The words hung between us like smoke. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Finally, he whispered, "I regretted it. Every day." My heart clenched, but I didn't let it show. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, my mind replaying every word, every look. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face forever, to relish the reversal, to let him feel the sting of rejection. But another part, the foolish part of me that still remembered loving him, wondered if there was truth in his regret. I stood by the window, looking out at the city I had built my life in, and spoke to myself out loud. What do you want, Clara? Revenge? Closure? Or do you want proof that you're free of them? I didn't have an answer. Daniel sent me an email the next morning. It was polite, professional, but the undertone was clear. He wanted another chance. Professionally, maybe personally. I stared at the words, my finger hovering over the delete key. My heart pounded in my ears. I thought back to that girl, the one who had walked out humiliated, broken, and I thought of the woman I had become. The decision wasn't simple. It wasn't black and white. It was a storm. I closed my laptop and whispered, more to myself than anyone else. They once cast me aside like I was nothing, and now they are at my door, asking for help, and I had to decide what kind of woman I truly was. When I left that meeting room with Daniel, my hands were steady, but inside I was trembling, not from fear, not anymore, but from the force of everything that had just come rushing back. His eyes, his words, the regret in his voice. It was like opening a door to a room I'd locked up years ago. The past, stale and suffocating, came pouring out. I went home that night and poured myself a glass of wine. I sat by the window, looking out at the skyline, and for the first time in years, I let myself cry for the girl I used to be. The one who begged to be seen. The one who believed love would protect her from cruelty. The one who thought Daniel Whitmore would stand beside her no matter what. But the tears didn't last long, because as the city lights blinked back at me, I realized something. That girl was gone, and the woman I had become had a choice to make. The next morning, I opened my email to find a message from Daniel. Long, rambling paragraphs, apologies, excuses, pleas. He wanted another chance. At the job, at redeeming himself, maybe even at rekindling whatever was left between us. I read every word carefully, then closed my laptop. But later that afternoon, he appeared again. My assistant buzzed to warn me, but I told her to let him in. I was done running from ghosts. He stood in my office, shoulder slumped, no trace of the arrogant air he used to be. His voice cracked as he spoke. "Clara, I know I don't deserve it, but I need you to hear me out. I was a coward back then. I should have defended you. I should have fought, but I didn't, and I've regretted it every single day." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "You're right," I said simply. "You were a coward. You let me stand there while your family humiliated me. You let them tell me I wasn't beautiful enough. Do you have any idea what those words did to me?" His face crumpled. I know I destroyed us. But I loved you, Clara. I swear I did. I couldn't go against them. They controlled everything. My life, my future. I thought if I lost them, I'd lose everything. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. And what was I, Daniel? Nothing? Disposable? He shook his head furiously. No, you were everything. I was just too weak to see that I didn't need their approval, too weak to be the man you deserved. His honesty stung, but it didn't move me the way it might have years ago. I saw him clearly now, not as the man I once loved, but as the man who failed me when it mattered most. I stood and walked to the window, letting the silence stretch. Then I turned back to him. "Do you know what's ironic, Daniel?" I said quietly. "When they told me I wasn't beautiful enough, I believed them. For years, I carried that shame like it was carved into my skin. But while you were hiding behind your family, I was out there fighting. Every inch of this life, this company, I built it myself, without you, without them." He lowered his head. I stepped closer, my voice steady. "Once, you were my future. But now you're only a reminder of how far I've come without you." For a long moment, he said nothing. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched, and I could see the anger flickering beneath his regret. Finally, he whispered, "So that's it? After everything we had?" "Yes," I said firmly. "That's it." His shoulders sagged. The fight drained out of him. "Then, I'll go." I nodded. "Do what you need to do, but don't expect me to save you. not again. As he walked out, I caught one last glimpse of the boy I used to love, not the man he was now, broken and humbled, but the boy who once made me laugh, who once promised forever. And for the first time, I felt no ache, just peace. After he left, I sat at my desk staring at the city beyond the glass walls of my office. My heart was pounding, but not with rage, with release. That confrontation wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about Daniel. It was about me, about finally putting the past to rest, about proving to myself that I didn't need his apology, his validation, or his love to know my worth. I could have offered him a job. I could have made him answer to me day after day as some poetic form of justice, but I didn't need to. Letting him walk away empty-handed was enough. Closure. That was my victory. Later that night, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, the cool air brushing against my face. I thought back to that day, years ago, when I had walked away from the Whitmore's house, humiliated and broken. They told me I wasn't beautiful enough, I whispered to the night sky, and I believed them. I let the words linger, then smiled faintly. But I finally understand. I was always more than enough. For myself, for the life I built, for the woman I've become. I lifted my glass of wine in a silent toast, not to Daniel, not to revenge, but to myself. And for the first time in my life, I felt free.